Hello, I'm Thomas Hare, Chief Content Officer of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a not-for-profit trade association that serves companies in the performance and direct-to-consumer marketing world. Welcome to the latest episode of Take 20, created by the PDMI's Brand Response Council. These 20-ish minute live conversations featuring leaders in the performance marketing world, speaking about the hottest topics in the industry, are scheduled twice a month. Before we get to today's conversation, a quick housekeeping note. We'll be addressing any questions from the audience at the end of today's session, but you do not have to wait to ask them. Utilize the questions tab on your control panel to type and send your question in. We'll be collecting them and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the final moments of this episode. So performance brands have long used audio outlets, terrestrial and satellite radio, digital audio, podcasts, and more as powerful testing grounds for campaigns ready to take the next step to scale. In recent years, though, audio has come into its own as a standalone powerhouse for driving the kinds of leads, sales, and customer loyalty valued by every D2C marketer. Each audio outlet has its own quirks, its own set of attribution challenges and opportunities, and its own set of best practices to consider. Today, Take 20 host and Brand Response Council Chair Chris Foster of Modern Postcard, who also hosts the podcast Menfolk Journeys, available on your podcast outlet of choice, welcomes this trio of member audio marketing experts to discuss what's new and what's next for this varied outlet, as well as what's working and what's not. Let's say hello to Irena Cibra of Southern New Hampshire University, Lissie Perkins of Casual Precision, and Buck Robinson of Retail and Response. We're excited each of you here to share your expertise. Thanks for joining us. Chris, take it away.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, everybody, and fantastic topic today. It's front and center. Like Tom said, audio's changed a lot, right? And just some statistics to walk through to set the table. U.S. digital audio spend will exceed about $7 billion in the 2024-2025, probably going to be exceeding that in 2026. And on both sides of the advertising relationship, the numbers really look strong. And a large portion of this is now digital, meaning it's more personal and one-to-one than a traditional radio. Like in the past, when I was growing up, radio would be on and everyone in the car could hear it. Now I can hear my specific Spotify channel. My daughter can hear her specific Spotify channel. My wife could be listening to a podcast, and we all can do it independently. So from the advertiser perspective, streaming audio ad spend is growing at about 9 to 14% year over year. 72% of marketers say that audio ads improve brand recall, and 64% of brands plan to increase audio ad spend next year. On the consumer side, the average person listens to about 1.8 hours, call it two hours of streaming audio a day. That's a lot. It's a lot of time, whether you're doing the dishes or driving around or exercising or going for a walk. That's when that time happens. In fact, 48% of US adults listen to digital audio during their commute. So much different than terrestrial radio in the past. Almost half of these commuters are listening to digital audio. 51% of listeners say they rarely skip the audio ads, and 63% of listeners use headphones. Well, what does that mean when they use headphones? It means it's quiet, it's intimate, right? This channel is engaging, it's intimate, it stays with the consumer during that engagement. And there's a nice fit between the niche of the audience and the niche of the podcast, for example, and the advertisers that meets in that middle. That's a really intimate space between the advertiser and the consumer. And it seems like it's a really good fit for brands who want to more authentically and personally connect with their niche consumers who consume the content. So we're going to dive in, super excited. Why don't we start with a quick roundtable to tell us about your business and your role. Buck, we'll start with you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Buck Robinson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Retail and Response. I've been in the direct response world for a little over 30 years, and the majority of that time has been working specifically in the audio space. So traditional radio, like you say, satellite, as audio has expanded its options, we've expanded accordingly. And our agency, Retail and Response, is really an audio specific agency that works with brands that are either looking to launch their products through direct response means, support retail, or some combination of both.
Excellent. Lissie.
Hi, I'm Lissie Perkins. A pleasure to be here with you today. I'm the EVP of Client Growth and Strategy at Casual Precision, and we're an attribution-focused media buying agency with decades of expertise in planning and executing offline media and their digital counterparts. We recognize the need for top of funnel media, but don't deny the measurement challenges. So we put attribution first as a catalyst for scale. We find that our focus aligns well with D2C brands that have saturated their digital channels and need media experts to strategize and measure incrementality testing in audio as well as in video.
Fantastic. Irena.
Hi, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Irena Cibra, and I'm a senior media buyer at Southern New Hampshire University, one of the largest nonprofit universities that caters to online learners. And we do have a somewhat small actual physical campus in Manchester, New Hampshire, about 3,000 learners. And as a senior buyer, I've been mostly focused. My team works with mass media in general and focuses on cable, streaming, and most recently podcasts. So that's been my focus, especially this year, diving in and discovering what fits we can find there, where our audience is, where they're listening, like you said, kind of that private listener experience with the headphones. And it's been an amazing year of learning and challenges and discoveries, and I'm really excited to be here and learn more about podcasting as well.
Fantastic. Really excited to have you all. So let's start with you, Irena, because as the brand audience and the brand perspective here, you said you recently started to do podcasts. As a senior media buyer, you're looking at a bunch of channels. Clearly, part of your role is to, seek out new worlds and new civilizations, right? So you have to experiment with new channels. And experimenting with podcasts, I'm sure, like you said, had some challenges. But talk about that, please. Tell us about what about podcasts that excites you, and what about it challenges you in terms of reaching your audience.
Sure. It's definitely a new medium, and in the past, probably since COVID, I would say it's a medium that took off. Obviously, you've mentioned the numbers. It's grown significantly, and the biggest challenge that I ran into is finding information, especially back about 5 years ago at this point, of learning more about the medium and what it means for advertisers and how to incorporate it. As the medium itself has grown and a lot of different companies have stepped in for measurement side, for just on the advertising side, I think now we're in a great place where we can really find a good balance of reaching our audience and to some degree measure whether the medium is working. The thing that I'm excited the most about, for my kind of day-to-day and my perspective, is reaching those learners, the incremental reach that we're not finding them anywhere else. Coming from a more traditional background with mass media, cable, streaming, it's a very different environment where there is no video component. It's a very intimate listenership experience where they have almost a personal relationship with the host, and finding ways to align with that is a huge difference from anything we've ever seen in any other medium. So that has been a really exciting challenge for me to find where our listeners are, what specifically the content they're consuming, and which shows, which hosts they're aligning with, and how can we find an alignment with our brand there.
That's great. I love that. I want to touch on that a little bit more. But Lissie, I'd like to go to you now, because she just mentioned some of the balances of finding audience and attribution. Your team is all about attribution. So like all channels, audio has its own strengths and weaknesses and its own job to do within that customer journey. You talk about that top of funnel job it might be. From the perspective of attribution, A, what do you think the job of audio is? And B, how are you solving for the challenges of attribution?
Sure. So, we develop MMMs so that we can measure the marketing mix in totality, and we do design incrementality testing into specific channels, including podcasting, which helps give us a view of how podcast contributes to the bottom line. And audio is a top of funnel driver. We also have found, though, that podcasts can serve really well down funnel from an efficiency standpoint. We've looked at baked in ads as really effective top of funnel brand awareness plays. And we can also complement that with DAI podcast ads in show specific placements or run of network placements to drive down funnel efficiency as well. So great from a both brand awareness standpoint, utilizing these shows that are drawing in millions of loyal listeners a week, and utilizing those baked in ads to provide a big spike in traffic, as well as the efficiency play on a more direct response driven podcast placement.
That's excellent. And we'll talk about that, and we'll do more of a deep dive, but I just want to pivot back to you. As Irena starts thinking about adding podcasts, I'm sure, Irena, you had a conversation with your team. You're like, hey, we haven't tried this channel. At some point, somehow, some brand is going to try podcasting for the very first time, right? They're going to try audio for the first time that the team has done this. So, Buck, from an agency perspective that's dealt with audio for the last several decades and the changes, sure, what's a common misperception that brands have about how to mix in audio with the rest of their marketing channels?
Oh boy, how much time do we have? No, I mean, seriously, it's a very misunderstood medium in general. And I think one of the things that we have to have kind of a sit down talk with a client who's considering it is setting reasonable expectations and really trying to determine what it is that's the main driver driving their interest in the first place. For instance, and I'll just use this in a lot of people will be like, well, I love listening to this podcast and it's one of my favorite podcasts and I'd love to be on there. And then they find out how much it costs. And all of a sudden, it just doesn't, economically, it doesn't make sense other than as a pure ego play. Like, I mean, seriously, they're like, oh, I'd love to be on. I had somebody who's like, I'd love to be on and Call Her Daddy. I'm like, Call Her Daddy is $125,000 a spot. What are you talking about? You're not going to test there, So I think it's really important especially for brands that are either getting used to, they're either, because a lot of the companies that we work with are using audio as the springboard for their first introduction to the marketplace, right? So,
okay.
You want to start in the kiddie pool. You don't want to start in the middle of the ocean. So we try to introduce that through where are we going to be able to get the best opportunity to take whatever budget they might have and stretch it and get as much value for that as humanly possible. And they may say, well, ultimately, we'd like to be on here, we'd like to be on there. And it's a mountain and you're climbing that direction, but you don't start there. Okay, let's start here and condition the creative and figure out what our closing rate is and figure out what our actual acquisition costs are going to be. And then we can work our way up the food chain accordingly. And I think that's really the way we try to help people do it, is instead of looking at the potential of audio as like, I want to be on this podcast or I want to be on that network program, is, okay, hold on, holistically, what are we trying to accomplish and how do we build towards that so that when you do see that price tag, you're not, in a sense, going to have that sticker shock of, oh my God, you can never do that. It's more of a matter of, oh yeah, that actually makes sense, because when I look at what I'm getting for that and knowing what our performance metrics look like from other audio channels, now all of a sudden that's not so risky. And I think that perspective helps people have an appreciation that audio is a lot more complex than they may have otherwise given it credit for, and that it has scale that it never had before. And I think that's one of the things that's most exciting, is that there are scale opportunities for the audio world that never existed 10 years ago between all of the various audio channels that now are available to marketers. It shouldn't just be seen as this kind of off the side of the table opportunity.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea where you guide that brand through not just a single audio place, but the audio landscape, right? Getting understanding that there's more to it and that podcasts have a place, and the job of that podcast spot is going to be different than a satellite radio spot. So Irena, as a brand and a media buyer, I'm sure you work with creative, and I'm sure you're working with your design team to figure out what that message is, whether it's a CTV ad or whether it's a podcast drop ad. How do you kind of make sure that your message changes throughout the different channel, but it still maintains that brand equity across all the channels?
Sure. Yes, we have a very robust internal team that works on a creative component, whether it's podcast scripts or whether it's the creative for our streaming or the cable side. And we have a pretty solid foundation of what's included as far as our value props and what we stand for, how we support our students, and how we guide them through the entire process of from the first lead that submitted the first application all the way to graduation, and supporting them within the process. So when it comes to creative, we try to incorporate a little bit of everything to show the process and the support that they get. And with podcasts, it's a little bit different because there is no video component. So you can't see visually the graduation, the excitement that goes into it. And however, on the other side, even though there's no video component to it and a visual, the beautiful thing about podcasts that it is such a personalized experience that we can tweak copy to match the host, the show, the genre, the tone, whatever it is, to make it still feel somewhat personalized and customizable. So even though there isn't a visual to see, they can kind of imagine themselves going through it. And generally, there's a little bit of a story to go with the flow of the actual show. So it's not so abrupt, and it doesn't interrupt the host and the content. It's a seamless listening experience. So that's been a really good kind of a different thing that we've seen on the podcast side.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. That was a fantastic answer, because the intimacy and the niche interest that someone has in a show, I see that there's such an alignment of what that ad could be in terms of the copy, and kind of stitching together the value of the school with the content of the show and why they're actually listening to that ad at that show. That makes a lot of sense to me. Lissie, I guess
actually, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to jump on that real quickly, because I think it's a really, really important point for people to understand kind of best practices relative to audio. Is that a lot of the folks who may be considering audio are coming out of the TV world, let's say. And in the TV world, there tends to be a move towards the commercial, like this is our commercial. And trying to come up with a one size fits all, or this is the one commercial that is going to tell our whole story, is not conducive to what the audio world is supposed to be all around. The audio world, we really want to be able to customize and personalize it. So a commercial that's airing on an outlet that's skewing to a female 35 plus audience is going to be a totally different commercial than one that's skewing to a male 18 to 35 audience. And you don't want to try and come up with a one size fits all. And as Irena said, it's absolutely correct. Actually, the worst thing you can do for a podcast, or even for a host on network radio, is try and give them something that isn't going to come off as being authentic to their audience. Their audience knows when they're talking about something that's a script and versus something that's their personal experience. And you don't want to neuter them by just saying, no, just say this. Like, no, let them say it in their own language and do so in a way that's going to resonate with their audience with authenticity. That's where your brand is best served. So I think there tends to be a move away from like how to homogenize things in audio, and quite the contrary. The best use is how do we maximize, optimize around each of these different audiences and how we tell our story differently to them.
Right. No, and I love that. And with that intimacy, I guess, Lissie, I would ask you, in your opinion, do you see a stronger response rates versus other channels? And do you have the data to support that? You talked about it being a top of funnel, but also you mentioned kind of that down funnel efficiency that you can get with audio. Are you seeing that bear out in the metrics?
Yeah, so, we're having this conversation about digital audio, but want to also bring in terrestrial audio into the conversation when we're talking about response rates and the cost efficiency of it. So when we look at terrestrial radio and the CPM, it's hard to match across the other channels how efficient it can be. And that response rate does kind of match up to where the CPM is, being that, hey, if my CPM on radio is 25% that of my CPM on TV, my response rate is around 25% that of TV, and it requires a higher frequency than what I need on TV. Now, when we go into digital audio and we start talking about podcasts and streaming audio run of networks versus digital video, excluding TV as a device type, because it's hard to respond that way, audio does have a 50% higher response rate than video in that realm.
Wow.
And we have seen that in the metrics. And I think for all the points that Buck just made, is that when we're inserting into these podcasts and we're drafting these talking points or these scripts, they are very much in alignment with the personality of who will be speaking on our behalf or on our brand's behalf. So we put a lot of research into ensuring that the talking points align to bring about that authenticity from the host. Additionally, when we're looking at just a streaming audio play and we're running a run of network against a particular demographic, and we have a produced spot that we feel is tailored to that demographic, that's also helping to stimulate these response rates and bring them above what we're seeing when we're comparing it to digital video.
That's fantastic. That's very exciting, actually, for the space itself. And I think that what I'd like to do is, because we're already at 11:25, I just want to ask all of you, with the saturation of digital channels that's happening, do you think audio is a growing place in the media mix, or will be confined to this like essential but really niche channel? Irena, I guess I'll start with you as senior media buyer. Are you allocating more spend to audio next year?
Absolutely. Yes, it is
Okay.
definitely not going to be a small part of our kind of a test pool that we're used to, especially with the growing, the rate that it's growing, and that we're seeing positive results from a lot of different genres and a lot of different publishers. I am hopeful that this is going to be a part of our core kind of marketing mix, that it's not going anywhere, and I'm really excited about that.
That's fantastic. Buck, what do you think?
Based on not just how our current clients are expanding their budgets, but the amount of new business prospects that we're talking to who are kicking the tires on audio for the first time, there's no question. There's no question that audio is having a renaissance. And I think that there's a couple of things there. One, there are more options, and therefore it's more attractive based on just the, AM, FM, or Sirius, that you have more to choose from now. Two, the economics are phenomenal compared to what you would typically see in other channels. And then three, and this is something I was just talking about with a prospect this morning, there tends to be a natural kind of suspicion associated with things that people now see on TV and or online. Like, they see these things and they're like, it's probably too good to be true, it's probably not something I can trust, whatever. And then they hear about it on the radio, or they hear about it in a podcast, and it's like, oh, that's that thing I saw, and here's actually somebody I trust saying that it's real. Now all of a sudden it takes on a completely new shine in the mind of the consumer. It's no longer just something being sold to me, it's something that somebody has validated. And I think that that's a really good use of audio, is as that kind of support to say, yeah, it is just as good as the TV commercial show, and I'm using it in my house and I love it.
I want to touch on that, put a pin on that, because that's going to be part of my answer to the final question to all of you. But Lissie, let's round up this question for you. You think it's going to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think Buck just addressed that, podcast host is influencer marketing. I mean, it's today's broadcast radio endorser of the past, where that loyalty is really going to drive the action, the consumer action. So yes, absolutely. And in addition to traditional radio, which, still has the largest net reach across all the audio channels. So.
That's cool. So I want to touch base and ask you each about an audio ad that you remember. So Buck, you had talked about this, where Satva is a D2C mattress brand. I've seen them everywhere, tons of ads, tons of online stuff. And then I listened to a podcast by Rich Roll, and he mentioned, oh, I sleep on Satva. I'm telling you, this mattress is amazing. And I got a different sense of the brand, because he's like, yeah, I actually have it in my house, right? I'm actually using this, abstract brand every night. It's part of my life. So it was a really interesting, and he's a healthy guy, he's triathlete and stuff like that. So anyway, it was a pretty interesting perspective that I got of the brand just because of his mention.
I'll give you just anecdotally, and I'm totally dating myself in saying this, but a lot of people here might still remember P90X. P90X, when it launched radio with us, was, everyone's like, no, that's too visual. It's way too much before and after. It's way too much hard bodies and all this kind of stuff. And how is that going to work on radio? Well, actually, what we did is at the time we got the on-air personalities to start doing it. And one of the things that we learned is we should never have them do a commercial like when they just started doing it, because they came on the air and they're like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. This is the worst thing I've ever done. But like 30 days in, they're like, I'm living proof that this is the real deal. And I am so pumped up and I'm so excited about it, because something on TV can be almost too slick and too pretty. But when you bring it into that reality of this is a real person doing it, and yeah, it's a little hard, but I'm feeling good about myself and my clothes fit better. That takes I kid you not, the guys who were the founders of Beachbody would say to me, when we go to parties now, nobody talks to us about our infomercial. They talk to us about the radio and what they hear the radio host talking about it, because it just brought an element that was otherwise missing to that campaign. Now, of course, that was a very successful campaign. So I think that brings up one last thing, is people shouldn't think of it as radio or TV or radio and this or whatever it may be. It's like, this is all part of a much larger, more complicated whole. And how do I use it? Not it's all this or all that. It's part of a much larger coordinated marketing mix.
Understood. I like that. I like that example. Irena, do you have a favorite audio ad? Besides your own, besides Southern Hampshire University? I know that's the ad, but do you have another one that you like?
Yeah, I frequently listen to Diary of a CEO, and he's got a lot of different guests, and a lot of them are talking about AI. And the products that he endorses are really interesting and usually right in line with the topic or the guest. And one of them that caught my eye was the Whisper Flow. That is, it takes your voice and transcribes it, but then it can also create written materials for you and reply to emails, texts, all that stuff. It's kind of like a personal assistant. And I've never heard of it until I heard it from him. And because I've listened to him long enough, it was the same thing as Buck was saying, that the trust is there. And it's just so different when it's endorsed by someone that you've developed this trust. Obviously, I've never met him, but it feels like we're best friends because he seems so knowledgeable. He's got all these great guests, and I know it's an ad and I know it's a product, but it just comes off as a personal recommendation in a way.
I love it.
Hey, I'll tell you, there are some products, like, again, coming back from the TV side, that as much as you might want to be on TV, your product doesn't exactly marry itself well to a visual. Sometimes the audio is better than the visual, and I use as an example, we did the Navage campaign, and the Navage, the minute the person sticks it into their nose and starts blowing water through there, everyone's like, ooh. But you hear about it on radio and you hear about the benefits you're going to get, and you're like, oh, okay, that actually sounds really attractive because you're not worried about the visual. So I always say to people, you can look at it as television without the pictures, but that's really not the best use of it. The best use of it is, how do you create that intimate story that's immediately going to resonate with that target audience in a way that goes, that's me they're talking about. That's what I need.
And that's the storyline. So Lissie, do you have like an ad that you remember and that you love?
I have a little bit of a different spin here. So I'm sure you guys remember Frank's Red Hot, and they had that big radio campaign several years back that, we put that beep on everything. They recently launched TV ads with the same tagline, which goes to show you how successful and memorable that radio campaign was, that it's now being resurrected over a decade later and being used for TV.
That's cool. I love it. All right, so we are well past 11:30, which is awesome. Tom, John, I'm sure we've got some questions from the audience for this fantastic panel.
We do, and as John did last time, for 2026, we're going to rejoin on screen for the Q&A instead of being just a voice in the ether. So well done, everybody. Great stuff. Answered a couple of the questions that came in as they were coming in. So, and I enjoyed the conversation here. The power, one, of host reads, obviously still a thing with any kind of audio. And two, to Lissie's last point there, I feel like that you can throw that back to the beginning of audio and video advertising, right? They had success on audio, and then they'd bring it over into the early days of TV. It's the old is new, old is new. So first question that came in that I'll throw at you guys, it touches a little bit on what you were getting into. How should brands think about sequencing audio with other channels like CTV, search, paid social to maximize lift across the funnel? I guess where, like, you're thinking about a multi-channel campaign, where does audio fit in with all those other things best in the funneling process?
I mean, I think radio and audio is a top of funnel driver. So sequencing your digital assets to give that continuity from audio into mid funnel and down funnel is a smart approach.
And I would just say it again, I hate to give a nebulous answer, but it kind of depends on where they're at, right? Like, it doesn't have to always follow the same sequence. Like, it doesn't have to say, well, until you've done this, this, and this, don't think about doing audio. Audio can be very well at the beginning of the campaign when you don't have any answers and you're trying to figure out what elements do we want to incorporate into these subsequent channels. Like, it's a great laboratory. It's a great place to just go out there and test some things, because you're not going to pay a ton of money in terms of your production costs. You can customize it and you can try things in the real marketplace and see how they respond. The flip side of that is there may be things, and I throw this out there too, there may be things that you've tried in other channels that failed. That doesn't mean you should look at it and say, well, it's not going to work in audio too, so don't waste your money there. And like, we have resurrected campaigns that failed in their first channels because it just wasn't the square peg round hole. So audio really can be very malleable. It depends on where you're at right now, what budgets you're looking at, and how you build the crescendo and learn from it. I think that that's one of the things that's really important about audio is it plays well with others. Like, it can benefit and supplement almost any other channel that you have out there.
Absolutely agree. And to add on to that, even within audio, not all audio is created equal. So between streaming and podcasting, it's very different audiences, the way they consume content. And a lot of the podcasts now have the video component. So there's some part of video that can be utilized on both, on the CTV and the YouTube side, or whatever other Spotify, wherever video is available. So there are a lot of different components in play.
That actually leads nicely into another question. As podcast growth in video, the aspect of video has changed, what does that do for campaign spend? Is this like, if you've been spending on podcasts that was audio only and it moves into video, does that spend now be considered video spend, or is that still audio spend? How do you make that campaign mix still work when that change happens? Or is that even a consideration at this point?
On our side, we're still experimenting with that. Do we separate them, or is it all one? Because some podcast hosts are heavily on the audio side and others are heavily on the video side. But whether you listen to them or watch them, the content is the same. So separating them right now doesn't make sense, at least the way we've taken the approach. But as this medium grows, as we have a lot more podcasts that have the video component, that's obviously probably going to change at some point.
And I mean, how it's been affecting us is that, our goal is to look at all channels in a unified view. So with podcasts utilizing video more often, so we ingest the delivery that we're seeing across the video component from an impression standpoint, so we can understand the full impact of that show, audio and video. So we're not necessarily separating them, but we're taking into account the incremental delivery that we're getting as video comes into the forefront podcasting.
Makes sense. Great. Last question, since we're getting up against the clock in a big way here. For each of you, if you could wave a magic wand, what measurement issue facing audio advertisers would you fix first?
Boy.
$1 million question.
I mean, ultimately, I think you really do need a unified view of your channels. You need to see everything on the even playing field, no siloed attribution, so that you can understand how each channel contributes to your full volume of sales and lead. So from that perspective, you know, we want to bring everything into the model, and we want to be able to provide you with simulations so that you can test incrementally into podcasting, streaming audio, or even terrestrial audio, and fully understand the impact of each.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely agree. And for a brand as big as ours with Southern New Hampshire University, we have such a big, robust website that gets leads from all over the place that having things siloed is really, it doesn't work. We have to be able to see the bird's eye view of everything and how each component plays into it. So that's crucial. Absolutely agree with that.
On our side, again, it all depends on how much noise there is, right? Like if you're in a situation where all you're doing is this one particular channel, then that's a nice situation because you can be able to tell it in some degree of isolation. But as soon as it starts to get more complicated, you need to kind of let go of that need to know how each one is looking, and more of a, okay, I mean, one of the reasonable expectations that we try to set for clients is if audio can basically eat what it kills and it can bring in enough to be able to justify that it's, but in return, it's benefiting all of these other things. So there's an echo effect that's magnifying all of the other things that you're doing and making it better. Don't judge it off of the one thing that's the linear attribution, and judge it more off of the holistic contribution that it's making.
Great last word, Buck. Thank you to all three of you. I'm going to go in order I see you. Irena, Lissie, Buck, Chris, thank you all for a tremendous conversation. We appreciate it very much. Our next Take 20 episode is set for Wednesday, February 4th, when we take a look at how small to medium-sized businesses are best accessing CTV ad inventory. Visit thepdmi.com/take-20 to register for the webinar and check out the upcoming schedule. And online registration for our 2026 in-person events, both PDMI East, April 13th through 15th in Miami, and PDMI West this October in San Diego are open. PDMI East is now less than 3 months away. If you want to mix incredible networking with tremendous educational content like you just watched today, the price is right. Badges are just $4.95 for PDMI members and $6.95 for non-members. Visit thepdmi.com/pdmi-east to register now. Thanks again for checking out this episode of PDMI's Take 20. Be well. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.